We need to get ourselves in first.
Hello, hi Aina.
Hello.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight and taking a break from the crazy news cycle, whatever is going on right now in our country, and joining us tonight for this evening as we chat with artist Aina Archer, whose current work is on exhibition here at the Macroscope. The show is called Osmondine Orchid Slab, and it's on view until next Sunday, October 11th. And thank you so much, Aina, for participating and exceeding your daily dose of Zoom this week.
No limits.
Let me just say something about you. Aina,
Well, first, let's thank the audience also for showing up.
Oh, sure. Audience.
Yes, it's always strange because we can't actually see you,
Yeah.
but we know you're out there and you'll get a chance to talk via chat at the end. If you haven't noticed, there is a chat form that shows up beneath this video. So if you have it on full screen, just at the time, you can just reduce it. And it's moderated, but you can start asking questions whenever you think of them. And then they're for Aina. She'll have a Q&A after this.
Yeah.
So now we can get started.
So Aina Archer is a visual artist and filmmaker whose work examines the intersections of race, ethnicity, representation, and technology. Her multimedia installations and single-channel works have been shown, among others, at Studio Museum in Harlem, New York, White Columns, Maisel Cinema, Harvest Works, and the List Visual Arts Center.
Among others.
Among others, yeah. Archer was a studio artist in the Whitney Independent Study Program, NYFA Multidisciplinary Fellow, a Creative Capital grantee in film and video, and she has been awarded numerous residencies. She's a media conservator at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Aina received a BA in Film and Video from Rhode Island School of Design and an MA in Cinema Studies from NYU. She was born in Paris, France, and currently lives and works between Washington, D.C. and Brooklyn. Brooklyn.
Yes.
Yes. The two great places.
Yes. So for the exhibition that we have here, which is called Osmondine Orchid Slab, which I assume many of the people watching have seen already. However, because we can be global on this platform, there's also many people who have not had a chance to see the show, and therefore we will try to show a little bit of documentation of the show, or actually some of the works in action as we talk about them. But the exhibition is, I guess you would say, kind of unusual in a way. It's Aina's first solo show at the gallery. And she has a great body of work and also a bunch of new works, which we have some of them on view, which are 8 collages, and the title piece, which is a projection onto the center of the larger installation of 3 collage piece. So there's collage with projection in the middle of it. And then we also have 2 of her older pieces, which are particularly poignant.
That me? All right.
No, I think it's us, sorry.
Okay.
Are particularly relevant to a lot that's been happening currently. The first piece is 1/16 of 100% ? Which is a single channel video made from mid-90s. And then we have another piece, which is Hattie McDaniel, or a credit to the moving motion picture industry, made in 2000, in the mid 2000s. So that's what's on view. And as we start talking, we will occasionally show you some of these. We could have kind of done that maybe. As
we'll do it
yeah.
as we progress.
So first of all, we just wanted to know, what were your thoughts about looking backwards, or right from the present, but looking at the connection of these works that were made so many at such a different time in your life, right? And also a time in our culture. And also, I just want to say, and I think we both feel this way, if you see the show, you wouldn't know by looking at the works, which was old, which was new, actually, which is amazing. Yeah.
Wow. That's really, because I was kind of like, is she struggling not to say like such a long, long, long time apart? But that's really a wonderful comment to hear that they're reflecting each other, um, uh, you know, that they're linked to each other in a way that doesn't feel like you're looking at, juvenilia and then newer work. And I'm really, really, I keep using the word thrilled, happy, all these kinds of things, but it's really has been a dream to be able to have these works in a space together, and including with my collage work, because it's such a through line for me, for all of them. And they come from the same thinking, the same process of looking at what's going on in the filmmaking world, or in the world of images. And so in some ways, none of the pieces ever end. And the other thing that's been really nice about having them be in a show together here is that they actually had to end, in a sense. Like, it's like, I'm not going to work on this anymore. It's done. Like it now has its place in time and in space, and these other pieces can grow off of it and become their own pieces. So for me, that's been very, very freeing, I guess I would say. And the other thing is that the problem hasn't been solved. The underlying problem with all of, that all of these pieces are kind of addressing is still manifesting in all different kinds of ways. And I think as time goes on, we're, as a culture, becoming more and more aware of the meaning of these kinds of images. So
Someone was saying you came here to see the show. Actually, I saw 1/16 of 100% 20 years ago, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again. And I imagine it's still as current, as present, current as it was 20 years ago, like, because nothing changed.
I hope so. It's I first showed it in a bar in Red Stripe Bar downtown in New York, and I think that it's in a way that things have changed, but how the piece reads has changed over time. And I think it's necessity, has gone up and down over time. And I think right now, recently I felt like, I'd love people to kind of see this, because it's in the front of their, it's these kind of images are in the front of their awareness. I don't want to talk about it too vaguely, I guess. I want to be more specific, but the idea of these characters who are, a couple of different things, minstrel characters, but then also the idea of miscegenation, of laws that kind of govern what miscegenation is, and the fact that this imagery exists so consistently in our Hollywood, in the Hollywood film canon. So, but I think I can guess who saw that. And it's so nice to know that somebody or that people remember it from these different evocations of the film.
I think you might not be able to guess who saw it. I think there's been
Oh,
an
okay.
there's been a lot of different people coming through who several people saw the work in the past, and then just a bunch of young kids coming out, as well as, I mean, everything. And it's been a really broad audience for the show.
Mhm.
It's really exciting. I think we wanted to talk, before we got so specific, a little bit about some other things first, just about the show in general. And then when we get more specific about the works, we'll show everyone the little clips and stuff. But you wanted to talk about this.
I want to talk about a possible, one of the possible common threads of the show, which is not very evident at all. It's actually, it only appears in the title of the main
Subtitle.
subtitle.
Yeah.
But
Do you want to show that image for those who haven't seen it?
I can try. Let's see.
Is it the first one?
Sorry.
Yeah. There. Ina, do you see that?
I do.
See, we see a cutout of James Baldwin's eye in this piece, and it's also present in different collages. And also one of the movies that is at the center of the piece, Osmondine, Orchid's Lap, is In the Heat of the Night from 1967. And it's one of the movies that James Baldwin talked about in his book-length essay, The Devil Finds Work. So there are also other connections, but this seemed to be something that is very foundational for the show.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything about that book or its relationship to the show in a just a little more?
Okay. Well, I think that James Baldwin, or actually, I'll back up and say it this way. The Devil Finds Work was really wonderful for me to read, and it feels quite different from James Baldwin's work. It's him enjoying and critiquing cinema. And I was very struck by his story of going to see Bette Davis and thinking that she had frog eyes like he had. And I really identified with this idea of the frog eyes, and that he felt that the glamorous women that he was seeing in these films looked like his family, or not his family, but his teacher or other Black women that he knew that he thought were beautiful. And so I think that was a little of just a little thread that kind of went through my mind about especially looking at his eyes and the idea of looking, and just of looking, and of flowers and bouquets. So, talking about it, it's hard to, it's not hard to, but it seems to sort of tamp down some of the just kind of resonances that these images have with each other. But that was a very specific idea, that his eyes and him looking at cinema, his opinions about them, his way of talking about films that is specifically Black, but is about film culture and looking in a way that, I think we all love about James Baldwin. It's like, he's talking about everything in culture, and yet and at the same time is about Blackness in a way that's so centralized and framing. And I think also just that he, liked and didn't like different films, and since it's the Halloween season, like, you have to read his takedown of The Exorcist, and then and it's very interesting to see him look at these films that are contemporary to his life, like In the Heat of the Night. And he has a very very gimlet eye about how these films are working. But I think the thing that really appealed to me most about The Devil Finds Work is this his ability to see himself in the films, even while the imagery is so much not about Blackness, we think, but in fact, we're able to identify across these barriers. And I think that that's something that Black people have always been very good at doing. And this is an early, very beautifully articulated version of that.
Yeah, it's amazing book. I mean,
Yeah.
essay, but it's book length essay. Everyone should read this. Actually, anybody who's watched the film, you know.
Well-worn copy. I put next to me to be a little guide.
So another thing that's interesting about these works is because they're dealing with such intense subject matter, and at the same time they have humor. And we found, especially, you know, trying to actually describe it, you know, where you're supposed to write a press release and say we're dealing with these subject matter and it's funny, is very difficult. You know, more difficult to actually make work like that. You know, and it's so amazing how you're able to deal with this tragic and the humor at the same time. And it's really difficult to talk about. I mean, these are things that you just do, you can do or you can't do, I think, you know, like it's just this, but it doesn't, it's not very easy, you know, and it's often very subtle in your work. I mean, some are very overt, but sometimes people take a while to understand that aspect, you know. Do you want to say anything about well, we were trying not to get too specific at this point, but it's kind of
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just in general, humor is pretty much in all of your works at some level, and it's also if you want to just talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. And I think I was talking with my cousin the other day, and we were talking about overhearing like a privileged laughing that irritated us, and she sent me a clip of Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. You know, it was like, you think I'm funny? Or why am I a clown? Like, you think I'm funny? And that clip is that scene is so frightening. And it's funny at the same time. And part of it is his rage. And, you know, I mean, it's always dangerous to try to explain why something is particularly why it's funny, but, you know, right, why it won't work. But I think thinking about that and laughing over that clip, you know, I think that in the end, there's a lot of anger in the background. And then that's a way to express that anger. I think there's a lot of ways where anger is expressed, but in ways that are, you know, playful or difficult, or not difficult, but are challenging, you know, because sometimes humor can be very, you know, in your face. And I think that that's part of it. So, you know, there's a love, but there's also a little or a lot anger. And I think that that's, and a kind of aggression that comes out in the use of humor. And I think that that's something that I think has always been there, but has become more clear to me these days. So.
Well, yeah, especially in the overt slap.
Well,
slap.
Yeah. Satisfying.
but for people who've seen the show, the piece, which we'll show shortly, is that slap, which is the first. Well, you can talk about that, but anyway, the slap sound permeates every piece and everything in the entire show, which is an exhibition choice. You know, it is. I know wanted that sound to be the focus, you know, of the whole entire show. So for anybody who felt like, why are some of my other works being interfered with this slap? That was intentional here.
Yeah.
We show a little.
Why don't we show it? Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
This is from the title piece.
Was Mr. Colbert ever in this greenhouse, say last night about midnight?
Oh,
I know.
It's gonna be terminated, but
yeah, that was a
Yeah,
small
I don't know
section.
if the sound came through. It was muted on my side, but it rings in my head all the time. So
oh, you couldn't hear it?
no, I couldn't hear it, but so I don't know. But you guys could hear it, so
Well, we're
hopefully it
playing
was
it.
heard. Hmm?
We're actually playing it, so we heard it
Yeah.
on for a video. Did you have it on?
Okay.
I think so.
Maybe someone could, if somebody wants to put it into our chat, whether they heard the sound or not, that would be helpful for especially moving forward with other things we're showing.
Yeah, that would be helpful because
yeah.
it was quite muted from where I was, even though my sound is way up.
Okay.
That's weird.
Or it kind of went in and out, but mostly it was out.
Okay, so you heard some kind of sound.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
All right.
Yep.
So,
So-
what were you going to say?
I'm just that yeah, I don't know if I should talk about this now, but that sound is well, it's very, I guess I like the way that it kind of becomes a soundtrack. And I'm not a musician, but I feel like I have musical inclinations. And so I've always been, I think with all of my work, very interested in using the sound and recutting it and having the visual kind of lead what happens to the sound, but like that a soundtrack that kind of creates itself from the work that I'm doing with the moving images. And so that slapping sound just became such a little tune that was wonderful to hear in a space, kind of resonating as that slap kind of resonated film historically. I don't think I was really thinking of it in this kind of grand way, but I just, having seen Heat of the Night, or having known Heat of the Night through that scene, since it's always so excerpted, it was interesting to see it in its whole, within the whole of the film. And, it seemed like the perfect, or, what else would you want except to, not slap the character and walk away. And then he stands there and cries. It's like, no, it just goes on and you just slap the hell out of him for an hour. And so it was, having a chance to do that was very fulfilling. And pleasurable.
People who don't know, it is in our press release, but for people who don't know, I do want to say something about what the significance of that scene.
Yeah, so it's so for In the Heat of the Night, it was a scene where it's a plantation owner, and the character that gets slapped, and he's offended that Sidney Poitier, who is a police officer or a detective, who is passing through this town and is accused of a murder. But then they find out that he's actually a detective, and he's pulled in to work with Rod Steiger, the Southern cop, with his yellow aviators to investigate this murder. And when he suggests to the plantation owner, who also has this amazing orchid greenhouse, that he might be not even a suspect, but just that he might be implicated in this murder that they're investigating, he walks over and slaps him, and Sidney Poitier immediately slaps him back, or Mr. Tibbs, the character, and this moment was striking in so many ways, because there was not earlier images of a Black character striking a white character. And also, I think Sidney Poitier and his particular image as a person who was standing up to the man, but not necessarily violently or physically, that he is also just immediately responds with this backhand, was an important moment in film history. For me, I think that Sidney Poitier is sometimes, and for a long time, I didn't find him to be that interesting a figure until I read his autobiography. And then I started to see his films as being much more active, and that he's more active as a character. And so to see him kind of express fury was a fun part of working on this piece. And so when he is approached and slaps back, this plantation owner says, asks the police officer, the cop, back in the day, we would have had you killed for this. And at that point, that's where you see kind of a respect, or at least confusion, with the police character, who is shocked by this, but also doesn't step in the old way, where they would just take him away and destroy him because he's a Black man slapping a white man. So a long explanation of what happens in the film. I was never very engaged with the film, and then in working on this piece and researching it to a certain extent, I went to I happened upon a site about orchids, and it was the most amazing analysis of the film, which was entirely about how orchids work in the film, because it's an orchid company. And so their reading of the film was entirely about osmundin, the material that you grow, use orchids to grow in. This slap that happens in that space, and how the greenhouse is so specifically constructed for certain kinds of orchid genres, or genus. And I thought that was really kind of freed the film from the way that we usually look at it as this, this moment. I think the film has been reduced to a moment where he slaps this character. And I'm kind of reducing it too, but extending it
Also,
in another
but
way.
also you take it into the whiz. So like that sound, it becomes the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, it's the rhythm track, a new rhythm track, with the whiz. So, I mean, you do put it in a different context,
Yeah, because you have to believe in yourself to do that. And there's a little bit of To Serve with Love where Sidney Poitier is dancing, because there's, just to kind of take Sidney Poitier out of his confinement and with music. And so he believes in himself, we're moving into another realm, and yeah, that's what it takes. And it's also a little, a little sarcastic.
Yeah. So,
There's a
maybe-
connection here with sounds that are in the piece Eddie McDaniel. There are sounds that are repeated, a laugh or the sound of a bell. They're very recurring throughout the piece. Could you speak up to that?
And I think with the bells and the laughter in the Hattie McDaniel piece, so it's about her winning the Academy Award in 1939 for playing Mammy in Gone with the Wind. And when I was looking for images or taking images of her, and there's a whole other story about getting film footage of her doing her speech for a work project, and being charged to use this film footage, and whether or not the people who were saying own the piece actually owned it. So once I was looking into finding different clips of Hattie McDaniel, I think just when you're looking at things and you're kind of winding them back and forth, you start to hear these repetitions. There's a bell that happens between a scene where you see a little boy on a kind of on the whatever that is on top of a bell that makes it ring, and he's ringing the bell. That sound kind of set with me as this sort of ringing that a couple of different things: the idea of a bell, the idea of a curtain going up. So the first scene that you see in the installation is that she's kind of raising up her skirt, showing this red slip that Clark Gable character has given her. So it's kind of like the sound that they make in French theater where they pound on the floor, or this thing that kind of initiates what's happening. And just to have a ringing sound that keeps you aware. The laughing, her laughter is, and I think her laughter and laughter of Black characters in a number of different kinds of circumstances is defiant and kind of, can undercut other kinds of oppression, or to be able to kind of laugh and express in that way, and also just humor as being this kind of pushback. And again, the sort of repeating these sounds creates kind of a soundtrack and a sort of a music that is, takes the piece from being just a sort of appropriation to kind of constructing a sort of musical or a oral sense for the projects. So and helps to organize it in a way. This how the music kind of comes around. So that it's not random, that it has actually a patterning that I would say would be musical to it.
And it's
Yeah, I
also-
mean, it's more than a musical though. I mean, it's not a musical. It is musical, but what I mean is that for people who haven't heard it, it's aggressive. Let's say
Mhm,
Oh, it's an aggressive musical. Uh, um, like it's almost you hear screaming at sometimes. I mean, it's it's the way this whole piece changes because it's repetitious, right? So depending on the way you hear the sound where it shows up, it has a different interpretation. Like the more you watch this piece, because we're listening to it daily and for hours and hours, the piece just keeps expanding and expanding. And then you have these sections of yourself. I mean, there's a lot in this piece. It's 6 minutes of a loop, of a synced loop, and 4 screens and plus 2. Why don't we show a little bit?
we should show them.
Yeah. Why don't we show the devil, that section with the devil character who is Ina?
Let's see.
Not here, the devil section. Not this section.
Really, especially handled to present this particular plaque. To me, it seems it opens the door. An America that's almost alone in the world today. Recognizes and pays tribute to those who give it their best. Sweet, it is with the knowledge that this entire nation will stand and salute. Actually, no questions, I don't tell you no lies. But I think the Academy Award for the best performance in supporting roles during 1931.
There you go.
Could you hear that?
Yes.
So you heard the laughter, and we could see you as a devil. That's
Yes.
right.
And, I've been talking about things, but actually, I feel like I'm making them too complicated. Sometimes things were very simple. It was just kind of like, I'm taking this material and the devil made me do it. And so I'm the devil now. And that's, basically what that is. And that, she's but the devil, but then also that you see her name come up, and I can't remember who the other character is, but his name is like Hog or something. He doesn't have a name really, and that kind of the devil kind of sees that. I think it's a way to be the overlord of of the piece. So it is also enjoyable, and the devil likes to laugh, so they keep this kind of diabolical laughter in there. And yeah.
Well, this is a piece where so she played the role of maid 74 times in her existence, and you're incorporating other roles of her playing the maid, as well as Ethel Waters, who was, as I understand, I mean, I think at that point she was already on. I mean, she had been on Broadway for a long time, right? In that role,
Yeah.
by the time she had to play still a maid. And then I read that Billie Holiday said when she went to Hollywood, she thought she was going to play herself, but it turned out she had to secretly have a life as a maid.
Maid, yeah. See, and I'm laughing right now, but that's horrible.
Yeah.
So it's that piece, so there's a whole little montage of different kinds of maids from different movies. So some of them are Lubitsch movies, and they're not Black maids, but it's different women playing these maids roles. and it's, you know, it's fascinating because they're playing a role of being servants. They serve the characters in the diegetic realm of the films that they're in. And as actresses and performers, they also serve a system of filmmaking. And it goes all the way, you know, the Help is the same thing. It's like the hardest working women in the entertainment industry. It's like, you know, effectively playing these parts over and over again, like bringing their talent to these roles that are subservient roles, and yet they're somehow undergirding the material that we're seeing. And so there's one screen that has kind of hands that are moving back and forth, or you know, kind of gesturing. Those hands are Ethel Waters' hands, and she's not a maid necessarily, but she's a caretaker. And you know, she's wearing an outfit. You don't see her face, but you know, this big bosom, like caretaking figure. There's a sound of Hattie McDaniel saying, you know, which I think of, you know, my mother would say that and all of that, but you know, it's such a familiar kind of nice phrase, and at the same time, you know, it's kind of for the piece saying overall, like, you know, you know, these white people putting us in these films in these ways. But these main characters are also quite funny and fun, and they're able, especially someone like Hattie McDaniel was able to complicate her roles. She was a great character actor who wasn't given the breadth of character roles that she should have had. She worked in every kind of entertainment media. She was in vaudeville. She created and recorded jazz records. She was had her own television program. She won an Academy Award for her performance, much of which is quite dramatic. You know, that part of you know, the parts of the scene, the parts of the film where she's emphasizing with the death of the child of Ashley, not Ashley, whatever the characters' names are. Anyway, that she's able to project this kind of sympathy and pathos without being, I think, pathetic. You know, I think in this piece, I really don't want her to be forgotten as an actor, because that's, you know, she's a professional, and her work needs to be appreciated, and we should be furious at the limitations put on it.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole piece rests on the idea, on the possibility that her acceptance speech was actually staged and reshot years later because of an inconsistency that you noticed in the footage, right? Where she is, a moment she has a handkerchief in her left hand, and then the moment after in the right hand. Actually, I'm curious. Is it something that you just noticed accidentally, or?
It was something that I noticed. I knew that there were stories, and I think that things have changed over time, but that there was definitely information that she had been given a scripted speech to talk about winning the award. And so that was the first thing. It was kind of like, is she acting right now, or not, or both, or a little of both. The idea that she was that she might that there was a cut in the footage was actually an investigation that came from, you know, when you're editing something, you look at it over and over and over again, and it's like, wait a minute, there's a cut there. So, you know, did she switch hands, or did it happen, you know, someplace where we couldn't see? So it was really a question. It was kind of like, and certainly it was a fact that that speech was recorded, but it wasn't something that was particular to her. That would have been everybody who got an award that night. And you hear, I can't remember the name of the actress now who gives her the award, in the, you know, in the background, you can hear her voice saying, like, you know, basically congratulating themselves for their, you know, their liberal and inclusivity by awarding Hattie McDaniel. But as we know, you know, as we now know, she wasn't at the award ceremony at the tables with the people, with the other members of the cast. And she wasn't part of the other festivities that took place around Gone with the Wind. But at some point, I think that became more of an idea. It's kind of like, here's a handkerchief, where's her hands, what's happening? Can't really see it very well because it's kind of blown out and repeated. But I think to keep the idea that she, you know, what was happening with her, and to keep investigating, or you know, kind of using this as evidence or not, is something that I like to play with.
So just for a time check here, we were talking for about an hour, and then at most, and then we're going to open it up to the audience, just in case the audience is wondering about what's happening here. So we wanted to talk about still
Single channel video.
the single channel video, and also your collages. We mentioned a little bit about the collages, but let's talk about 1/16 of 100% question mark.
Exclamation point.
So that's the oldest piece of the show, and that's an early montage video. I mean, it's video, but from films from the 1920s to 1950s. And let's remind everyone that has seen the piece or hasn't seen the piece that this was before YouTube, a lot before YouTube. So in order to get these kind of
how do you do it?
Segments, a lot of work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't just type in and see if it was there, right?
Yeah.
And then you still have to watch the film, follow the piece. But this is a much more a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. It's so classically, you know, like all the guys, I worked at a video store, so that's how I was able to access the videotapes. I was working at Evergreen Video. I was very fascinated by this idea of these different films that had blackface performance or just black films generally, because they were, you know, in our home. It was kind of like, oh, there's a movie on with black people. You get up no matter what time and you watch it. But I was able, because I was at this working at the store, to take the tapes out, and I had access to kind of high-level prosumer video equipment. So I think I was using like an SVHS deck where I could, you know, copy the clips, and I would make myself these sort of VHS clip reels of these different scenes. And so that's how I would get things. the piece was originally edited on a Hi8 analog editing system. And so that gives it the look that it has. And it's, I think at the time was, felt very much like an essay film. So, certainly now I would have intervened more, but in a way, like letting these scenes play out was part of the, just observing these scenes of Marlene Dietrich or.
Let's show some section, but you're also not, you're breaking up the scenes as well. I mean,
Oh,
you
I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, you don't just play the scene and then it's another scene and then it's another scene and creating.
Oh yeah, no.
You're like, stop the scene, insert something else, put something else. I mean, there's a lot of editing involved as well.
Yeah, and I think for my work at that time, it was the most planned out. Like it went through a much more like a production process where, there was pretty intensive storyboards. I had works in progress screenings and other kinds of that kind of intervention or resources. And
Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
No.
I just, one of the things that that came up for me much later with 1/16 to 100% is when I would try to go back, I would sort of update it by using more better technology, in a sense, or try to repair it or knock out glitches and stuff like that. And sometimes when I would go back to the original 6 VHS tapes that I had made, sometimes the copy code, what is that? The thing that stops you from copying things.
Yeah, you get like
would
2
come
seconds.
up like 3 or 4 renditions down from when I first, it was amazing. It was like the copy code is just gonna, it's so strong. but yeah, so that's how I was able to get those pieces. And actually the saddest scene in the world of the little girl rejecting her mother in Imitation of Life.
I can't think about it.
It's it was a piece that it was a film that I really wanted to access the 1930s version of the film, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I'd never seen it, and it was, but I knew of it. I would see it on TV every once in a while. And I also knew about it because my mother was like, "Oh, that Piola is such a terrible little girl who doesn't love her mother and rejects her." But I couldn't get it. I couldn't find it. So I used the Douglas Sirk. And in that way, I ended up coming out of the pattern of using movies that were basically from the 30s. And I think that actually enlivens the piece and kind of makes you realize how virulent that and how consistent this this racial panic is that goes through some of these movies. But I would like to go back and look at the earlier version of Imitation of Life that has, a Black actress playing the mixed race woman, Freddie Washington. Louise Beavers plays the mother role. The little girl who's in it is like a little 1930s gangster. So when the mother comes to see her at the classroom and says, "Oh, that's my little girl," the daughter is just like, "I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you." And that's really what I think the whole piece was almost around like getting that little girl going, "I hate you. I hate you." And I so that's the secret little terrible girl animating that piece. But
yeah, you wanted
I mean, it's an amazing
yeah.
document.
It's not a
Or-
document, it's a piece, you know, but it is
Yeah.
also at
It's also
some
historical
level,
document,
because
yeah.
you don't see this stuff. Okay, so these sections are things, in some pieces there's a lot of it, but in some of these films they're sections, right? I mean, actually in the ones you chose for this, these are often a lot of the footage of the
Mhm.
work. But somehow I think people throughout history kind of, I don't know what they do, but they just watch the movie, let's say, right? And they
Right.
suspend, I'm talking about white majority perhaps, you know, it's kind of suspend, but other people, I don't know, you can talk about more about what I'm trying to say. But when everything's cut out and put out and there's no pause as you've done it, you know, it doesn't feel like it. Like it's not a onslaught, but it's a slow build, let's say. But it is an onslaught, right? But it's a kind of touch where, I mean, it's just a heartbreaking piece. I mean, it's more than heartbreaking. It's an enraging piece, but it's also you have an ability to expose these things in a way through using the imagery we all see, and there's no excuse. Let's say, like, there's no excuse. Like, how can we tolerate this stuff?
Mhm.
How is it possible?
Because you don't see it almost, right? You know, it's there. It's so seductive. It's kind of incorporated, as you say. It's like it's just kind of there. So you know, I would go to the film forum or some other kind of repertory programming, and it's just kind of there in the background. And you know, it's like you could throw a rock and hit a minstrel, and so. Um, So it's numbing and not at the same time. But I think when you start to isolate it, it's infuriating, it's sad, it's funny, you know, and looking at that piece over the years, sometimes I watch it and there's a montage in the middle that's a minstrel show. There's just lots of different images from minstrel shows from commercial Hollywood films. It's not like I went to, you know, any place unusual to get this material. There's some of it's a little bit of French early films, but it's all very accessible material. And by the end of that little montage, it's just like I could be almost in tears. And other times I watch it and it's kind of like, man, those people are crazy. And so I feel like what it has felt successful about that piece is that it it keeps bringing the emotion with it. And it makes people sort of ask themselves, is kind of like, oh, I've seen this here, I've seen that, you know, and when you start to look, it's, you know, there's a lot of that material out there in our film history. And
Well, and it's a weird thing because it's not like you don't. I mean, from my personal experience, I remember seeing things that would really disturb me in certain films as a child and when I was growing up, that would anger me. But the movie keeps going, right? So,
right,
like if you're sitting at a movie theater, the next, you know, it just keeps rolling. So
right,
you
right.
don't get to pause it and get upset. You know, you can do that today. You can pause and walk away, or just, you know, do it. But
Or
yeah,
take it out, or
yeah.
but yeah, it's just I mean, I, you know, remember going to see That's Entertainment with my father, and it was just like so exciting. That was, you know, kind of my entree into looking at older films. This big MGM compilation of their greatest hits, right, made in the 70s, late 70s, and they have a big Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney, you know, montage of their greatest hits, and the whole thing is a giant minstrel show, and it was just fascinating. But my father was horrified and furious, and we're sitting in this theater and I'm just kind of like, there's something, you know, I'm getting mixed feelings because it's also beautifully presented. And I think that that's something that's really, you know, that's the other thing that comes up. Like I really have never wanted to make these pieces be unattractive in a sense. And that's another, I wouldn't say subversive, but it's a little bit of the trick. It's a little bit of the handkerchief, like, or did she make this speech or not? It's like, oh, I'm kind of enjoying this, but it's wrong, you know. And I like to play with that idea.
Also, there's been an attempt maybe at removing some films from circulation. HBO actually this year in June removed from its library Gone with the Wind, and then he put it back with an added introduction to it to give more context to the piece. Walt Disney has done the same thing. What do you think about this?
I think it's complex. You know, I'm very respectful of Jacqueline Stewart. And so the fact that they, you know, I'm very respectful and very, and I like very much the way that she contextualized Gone with the Wind for HBO. That said, you know, our HBO watchers really like is Gone with the Wind the first film they're thinking of watching, and I maybe I have a tough skin, and can watch these films and be bothered by them, but not necessarily feel like I can't take it. But I'm definitely against any kind of suppression of the films. I think giving them context is helpful. I also think that giving them context is allowing them to continue to make money and to be in the public realm. So I'm a little bit, suspicious of that. It's kind of like we have our cake and eat it too. It's like, oh, it's wrong, but you know what? We're still showing it. I think it's a very slippery slope as well, because then maybe you need to put a little something in front of, every film. And so I think it's troublesome.
Even today, even today. I mean, even today.
Yeah. There's so many films, and the article that was in the New York Times about, kind of identifying different kinds of minstrel shows is really, I read it in the paper version of the paper, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. But there's so many films that are missing, and but it's nice that this is coming up, and I think we have to question, what we're going to do about this, because it's a lot of material. It's really, like, to me, the foundation of film, certainly of commercial cinema. This kind of imagery, and but when I went to post about it, they had this beautiful New York Times, like, clips, extra material, all that other films and stuff that I was thinking were missing. And that was really, it was great, first of all, to see more breadth of content, but I also realized that it was so, like, great looking, it was like, oh, here's the clips, they're in color, there's GIFs, and and that there's a certain amount of pleasure that comes out of these images that also has to be wrestled with. And I think that that's another conversation. Yeah, another conversation, but it's what do you do about that? Yeah, when you have you're putting context around these films, what is the end game? so that people watch it anyway and are like, oh, I'm glad I knew that, this and that about Hattie McDaniel, or that these images are bad, or that there's a lot of this in filmmaking culture. Like, I guess that's what I'm not really understanding. It's like trying to have it both ways. It's like, enjoy this big, classic movie of the South, but I feel good about watching it because I got some context. I don't want to be cynical, but
Yeah. There's a lot to say, and we don't want to cut this short here, but we're getting to the hour moment. I don't want to not move. I don't want to open up to the public before we just say something briefly and show some of your collages, because I think that what you were just talking about in terms of the beauty, do we hear her?
Yeah.
Oh, is also happening in these collages, where you've taken a book from the 1900s and used it as the base for mixing in materials that you found. I mean, sometimes it's Jane Baldwin, but also mixing in materials up until the present. Do you want to briefly and pause, minstrel imagery, and then the Gali imagery that's happening in Southern Europe still. And these are really intense, but also beautiful works, at the same time. Source material, yeah.
Yeah, well, I really enjoy working on the collages, and I think it's a parallel kind of process to working on the film montages, because you kind of look at it over and over again, and you can take them out of context and put them into other context. And I'm kind of enjoying not really making it's not a narrative, but there's kind of a suggested narrative of looking at these little, gollywogs and these kind of caricatured characters who maybe are going a little rogue or something, so they're not so they're kind of connected by flowers, and trying to reuse the some of the printed material that's in the collages. But for instance, this minstrel guy with the monocle, like, I like monocles. That's my kind of Tristan Zara thing. I like monocles, but also is a monocle kind of a snooty upper class person, or what does the monocle mean in this sense? The little character kind of comes up in one of the other collages, where the little head of the gollywog has taken over the body, has knocked the head off of that other guy. Just, thinking about, like, what if these characters just did their own thing? That's a little bit of it. And then some of it is just really kind of seeing where it takes me when I have the different materials and putting them together.
You want to talk just briefly, and then we'll open up to the audience about some of the materials you are using. I'm not sure these are scans, but it's some of it's charcoal. I mean, you're doing drawing. You're using various. Do you want to talk a little just briefly?
Yeah. So some of it is are sugar packets and other materials like that. Some watercolor drawing with rapidograph pens and other kind of ink pens. I like the idea of decomposition. So there are, some of them have sections, especially the one that was prior with the little kind of pooty figure flying around that is kind of a drawing of decomposition, trying to replicate in some sense the look of this sort of melting film. And kind of collecting roses or making roses that are sort of little monotypes, like a kind of monoprint process. And trying to, like, despite the kind of precious look of them, trying not to let the images that I'm excerpting become too precious. And that was a little bit of a battle at first. And then I was kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna cut this up and make it into something that, and not just have it sit somewhere and I want to remake it. So yeah, I don't know. I have a more difficult time talking about them. They feel much more like there's something really soothing about working on them. They kind of develop over time. I'll be working on one, and then some little piece of one that I've cut out or something I'll put down, and then that will be the genesis of the next one, kind of building up. So I'll typically work on a couple of them at the same time. And at the same time, something like this one with The Devil Finds Work, I just had the element of that kind of circle and the flowers, and I just wanted to kind of explore drawing and just kind of going with what I was feeling. It sounds so like I just wanted to go where I wanted to go, but it's very, it's an exploration. I like exploring that
I think
material.
you have kind of an intuitive, at some point you just you just do it.
Yeah.
You let
But while at the same
you
time
don't-
realizing that I was very interested in flowers and this trying to take the flower imagery and the decomposition and having those things kind of work together, because I like that imagery. But yeah.
Okay, so audience, if you are still with us, we've been, like, the thing is, we always say that there's so much, each of these works you could talk about for hours and hours on their own, including the collages. So we've talked a lot now. We'll let you ask some questions.
We have a few questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll read them to you, Ina, but we'll post
okay.
them. Yeah,
Can I see them or no?
No, we'll post them. Go ahead.
Okay.
Can you see the chat?
Oops.
Just read it.
Okay, I see the chat, but I don't see anything on it.
It says, are you familiar with Jean Rouche's Les Maîtres Fous film, which seems to invert the blackface power dynamic? What is your impression of this?
I have not seen that film. I've seen, did he do, it's not People on a Sunday. Anyway, I have not seen that Jean Rouche film, but I will. So I'm sorry, what is the title?
Les Maîtres Fous.
Yeah, I know. I've not seen it. I have seen it being projected in a kind of a gallery setting, but I've never watched the whole film.
And he also says, as in, I've been told blackface originated in Africa and was co-opted in the USA. Do you know the history of where blackface originated from?
Ooh, that's a big question, and I do not. But there's places where I would suggest going to. So my specific interest has been in blackface as it occurs in cinema, especially around the transition to sound. And that kind of blackface, comes over from the blackface that would occur in vaudeville, and I think depends on a reliance with earlier kinds of performances that get taken into early sound films in order to take advantage of both the performers, but also with familiar contexts. And then I think there's, the idea of blackface minstrelsy coming up in order to kind of control African American participation in all kinds of modernity in city context. So the fact that there's a lot of blackface performance that happens in the East Coast is and that happening in the East Coast, but also sort of taking over from white people performing in blackface to Black people performing in blackface, and kind of refining the minstrel context. But going back to kind of African kind of masquerade and those other kinds of practices, I'm not as familiar with, but I think that there's a lot of investigation of like how these forms have developed.
Okay, then Amanda Traeger asking, also curious how you feel about the current explosion of episodics exploring in Black life, Black studies, Afrofuturism. Is it exciting to you, or are there mixed feelings? Have you seen Lovecraft Country? Also, in
Just like 5 questions.
I know. It's like, wait, what?
Also, in the context of your work, are you interested in the figure of Michael Jackson and his performance of blackness?
Whoa.
Let me just start with the first one.
Pick
whichever one.
Yeah.
I might have to rethink now. I'll say overall for me, I've been very hesitant to ascribe blackface to people like Michael Jackson, or thinking about blackface, back in the day when I was, first working on these, there was a lot of the idea of rappers or certain kinds of expression, hip hop expression being kind of like blackface, enacting a kind of blackness that's performative and not positive. And I haven't been thinking about that very much, but I tend to back away a little bit from talking about Michael Jackson in a sense of being blackface. I don't like to. I think it's such a complicated subject that I don't like to paste it onto performers or performances necessarily, unless they're, it's pretty obvious that someone is putting on a blackface for some reason. So that's my awkward answer to that. I can't remember what the first question was, the first part of the question.
Explosion of episodics exploring in Black life, Black studies, Afrofuturism.
The explosion of Afrofuturism and Black studies?
Yes, is it exciting to you, or are there mixed feelings?
No, it's exciting. I think I'm interested in Afrofuturism, or Afro-surrealism actually is at my, I've worked with my friend Terry Francis about, talking about Afro-surrealism that is, a little bit distinguished from Afrofuturism in the sense that it's about this, it's hard to, I would say that my work is Afro-surrealist, that it's, subscribing to a complicated and generative kind of ideas of Blackness. Some of my work is very much about science fiction and Afrofuturism. Sun Ra kind of comes into it, the idea of early Black cinema being abducted by aliens and representing the Earth by these abducted films. So that's an idea that's very interesting to me, and I love that Black horror and shows like Lovecraft Country. Like I'm all about like Get Out and all. I think that kind of imaginative understanding of Blackness is right on. So. And I was like up and down about Lovecraft Country, but the last episode I was like, right, yeah, you're on it. So
One more. Your bio suggests that all of your formal training is in film. So I'm wondering if you have any formal training as a visual artist, because your collages are so wonderfully deft. I'm impressed by them, so I wonder if you are self-trained as a collage artist.
I thank you. I went to RISD, and so I think like many who go there, you get an artist training. So I was always kind of falling in between cracks in medias. So in many ways, for myself, I didn't make a distinction between those. It was kind of like you got trained in visual language, in looking, drawing, learning to do things that you didn't necessarily want to learn, like constructing 3D things. Like that for me was difficult, but if art school is relevant or useful, then I would say that my time in art school helped me to be able to move between mediums, because that's what I really enjoyed. That's what felt fulfilling for me.
But you were making collages back then, and
I was making collages back then, yeah. And I've been making them since I was in high school, really. I liked something about it that I liked. Yeah. And it would become kind of secondary. It was the thing that I did, on my own. And so, looking at the piece that's behind you is the dream, really, to be able to combine the two, which is, always in the back of my mind.
But you also, for people who haven't seen the show and haven't seen some of your other works, you also make objects and you have sculptural installations, and there's a lot of, I mean, you're an artist. I wouldn't define you as a filmmaker. I mean,
Yeah.
I say filmmaker in
Yes.
under the artist, which you've been doing
Yeah.
for years and years, the whole time. So for anybody who's
Yeah.
not,
Multidisciplinary.
Seriously, could you talk about the little
no, we're not asking
projection?
any more questions. Let the audience ask them. We can try at the end, but let
I'm
the audience
curious.
ask the question. We can ask
Another
you later.
You read that
Is there no more questions at this point?
at this point.
Oh, then you can ask your question.
Too late now. Too late.
Well, I know what he's
Um,
gonna ask. No, go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I love this little projection onto the collage that's behind us, using a book page as a screen. I love it. Why is that?
But this isn't the first one you've done. You have another one, right? That you did it.
Yeah, I have one other one like that. Yeah. I have another one, and then I have one that was in a show in a dollhouse. So it was a teeny weeny projection in a little room in a house, and so I like that miniature. But I'm sorry. So what's the what is the question?
No question. I think he was just commenting that he loves it, but I mean, it is really difficult to do because
But
you have to.
I guess it came out of your practice, intermediate practice.
Yeah, it was it was an attempt to animate the surface in a way, and to create a screen for these images, and also I guess to have a way to present a less linear kind of moving image. So, because I'm, to have something that, has a little bit of a narrative, but just enough so that you can, experience it. I don't want to say like experience it as a collage or experience a collage like a moving image, like it's something in between those.
It's new. I mean, it's you managed to get right there at the edge. I mean, at least this one that's in the exhibition, it's fully integrated, which is not easy to do. I mean, it goes, you see the screen purposely so it reminds you that there's a screen. I mean, it's a really beautiful piece. And for people, just to be clear here, we are extremely paranoid about maintaining safety in our building and in our space. We are only taking appointments. We sanitize between each appointment. We only book 2 people or a group of, if you're a group, you can be up to 4, but you have to be really a group, not like random friends who decide to come for a group. But, there's 1 more week. So if you feel like coming to see the show, and you can get here, meaning you're in New York, you should make an appointment. So you can write us at inquiries@microscopegallery.com, or you can also, can you share that link where you can make an appointment? But
in the meantime, we have stimulated more questions. Jeannie says, the first time I saw your film works, Aina, I thought to myself, oh, that's a super interesting take on oppositional gazing. Hooks talks about how Baldwin and The Devil Finds Work was important to her. And of course, Mulvey's male gaze and how the patriarchy works in cinema. I wonder if you have any remarks on Hooks, etc.
Oh, I'm having a blank on his name for a second, but The Celluloid Closet was a big a big influence for me. I remember getting that book, seeing this book, and it was all in a sort of silvery cover, and the idea that you could take a film and look at it and just see it from a particular identity position was, I wouldn't have ever said it like that at the time, but it was just like, that's amazing, and realize that was something that I was doing. It's kind of like, I don't know what's going on in this film, but I'm going to make it Black, or I'm going to make it me, or I'm going to be the person, I'm going to put myself into this. Yeah, it's I don't know if I ever would have defined it as oppositional, but I certainly felt like it was, taking some control of the gaze, and certainly with some of my other work, where I'm performing in it, and it's kind of like, well, I like Fassbinder in Fox and Friends, so we're going to date. So I'm going to, have a flirtation with him, or I like Richard Harris, so I'll be him. And I think it's a way to make, a media that's not necessarily friendly to you under your control or accessible. So, but
at the same time, you seem to have so much love for this medium.
Yes, very much, very much. And that's the
That's why it's
problem
so
to
heartbreaking.
solve.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the only way, it's a way to keep sane, or I would go crazy. I'd be furious. So, and so that's the way to, it's like, I'm going to make it work for me and hopefully for others. But in the end, it's kind of like, how can I take this and make it all right? Or not even make it all right. It's just kind of like, I'm gonna control it now. So I'm gonna slap it in the face repeatedly.
Is there any other
Right.
questions here?
Yes, one from Diane. I love your collage, and in them, just as in your videos, you create tension between the celebration of and critique of these complicated images. Can you talk about how important the seduction of imagery, such as beautiful flowers, is to draw in the viewer to a layered meaning?
Well, I think that's what it is. Hopefully, is that it's with all of it. You look for things that you enjoy, I think, and you enjoy what's there that's visually enjoyable. It's like a weird circle, but I like to walk on that edge, and have things be a little questionable, and I think that edge is where things are productive. And for me, I'm not comfortable about making work that is not that doesn't try to bring you in, or that you don't want to look at. I want to draw people in, and I want to draw myself in. So yeah, I don't. It's also that angry thing too. It's kind of like, well, okay, so here's a little story. This little gollywog knocked the head off of this guy, and now it's his head, his body. He took it over, and and it's a little, I want to like sometimes be a little naughty, I guess, or something. So, and to play with it, and I think it makes me feel, it's playing in a way, and yeah.
Jeannie says, the edge is where the heat is.
Mhm. It is. It is.
It's not easy to get that edge. I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. I mean, you really get that edge. It's not an easy thing to get, where it works in all these different ways. I mean, it's really, yeah.
Then Bradley saying something.
Oh, Bradley.
Your slap is like a snap. It wakes you up while being subversive and liberating and expanding. So thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's like I like having that soundtrack in my head.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
Do we have other people saying stuff?
No.
No. I mean, this has been quite a long talk, in the middle of one of the longest 2 days probably in a while of everybody's.
At least we forgot for a couple hours.
Yeah.
I know, really. I could have been just sitting like looking at that TV, watching time go by. So
But
so I
the
really
thing,
appreciate it.
I mean, these are the real issues. I mean, that's a real issue too, COVID and all the lies. But this is also a serious issue here that you've been dealing with for many decades, and it's really great to be presenting your work and to be working with you. And we're happy for everyone who got to see the show. And if you haven't seen the show,
There's one more week.
there's another week. And if people want to follow up about specific questions or things, please do. And perhaps we can give you some previews and stuff like that. So
Yeah, if anyone's scared, we
Yeah.
can send you virtual experiences.
yeah, the virtual experience is not really the highlight of the show. I mean, seriously, these works are not meant to be translated to the internet,
Yeah.
Yeah, and even that the one piece, the single channel piece is projected on a screen, but we projected it in your solo show we did last year on a big screen. So you had the big
Mhm.
screen on the big screen, although ours was, still not the big screen.
Yeah, the big screen.
You can go on
giants.
the big, we could actually run a theater maybe someday and present it all on the big screen, even though
It's really wonderful to have that piece in relation to the other pieces. That to me is like the dream. So I really appreciate that, and I think that that's where I love that it's there with its brethren.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is every single work in the show, those collages make you get so close. Every single work, you really have to get close. They're intimate experiences, which isn't always the feeling you get from these kind of works. So it's very personal, and everyone has to think. I mean, there's nobody you can't just. It's not possible, I don't think, to just superficially look at these works. So, all right, we could keep talking, but I think we people are hungry, perhaps, or thirsty, or
Thank you, Aina, for joining us
Oh,
tonight.
thank you. And all of a sudden my screen just like went away. But thank you so much. Thank you. And
thank you, everyone. And
Yep.
hopefully we'll see you this week, and we'll regroup with you later.
okay.
Bye bye.
Good night.
Good night.